All right. So we're live here on d20play. We got John and David and a whole bunch of different subjects to talk about. So why don't we start with the new Dragonlance book? And that is Shadow of the Dragon Queen. We've been running it with David playing. John, I don't know if you've had a chance to see it yet or not, have you?
I have it. I haven't had a chance to play it or run it, but I own it.
Okay.
I got the version, the premium version with the board game, but I haven't even opened the board game yet.
So David, you had a pretty glowing review of it. What do you think so far of it?
Yeah, I've been super happy with this. In contrast with Spelljammer, that has at times felt like a tour through the Spelljammer monster compendium. This has really been a fun adventure. I think it hits a lot of points. It's not just trying to be here's Dragonlance. It's trying to be a good D&D adventure, and I feel like it succeeds. There's points where the party seems like we're making some interesting decisions. There's NPCs that stand out. There's situations that are better than here's a 20 by 20 room and foes at the other end and fight. There's been some dramatic emotional moments in it. And through it all, I feel like there's been a feel of Dragonlance and some of what makes it unique. Now, Tom, I know that you got a comment based on your videos posting of this game. Somebody saying that you added some of that, and I don't know how much credit you can take. That's the one side of evaluating an adventure as a player. It's very hard to separate what's coming from the DM and what's coming from what's on the page. So I'd be interested in your take on that.
Yeah, that was a really flattering comment. And I'm a big believer the DM really makes the adventure. It doesn't matter how good it is or how bad it is. You got to have the DM really try. If the DM doesn't try and just kind of presents it as is, then you'll see what the adventure's like. And it won't be often very good even then because the DM's not really going for it and trying hard. So yeah, the prelude parts of it aren't really well fleshed out, which is the first level part of the adventure. And I went back to DL1, the original Dragonlance Adventures, for inspiration and tried to pull some stuff out of there to kind of flesh out the encounters a little bit. Plus, you know me, I like combat, and there was hardly any of that in there, so I made sure I added some of that in too. But once you get to chapter 3, where you get into the town of Bogler, the NPCs in there are from the adventure, and they're really deep into the lore. I didn't know who they were, and if you're going to run this as a DM, definitely Google every name, because there's some that are really big NPCs in the lore of Dragonlance, who aren't big NPCs yet, but will be. And so, yeah, I'm really liking the adventure so far, and I really like how the last half of the adventure brings in even more of the Dragonlance lore. And I feel like each part of the adventure a little bit plays off of the themes of the first DL adventures, DL1, DL2, DL3, DL4. There's a lot of themes from those adventures that are showing up in this adventure. So it does really feel like Dragonlance to me.
And can you tell us a little bit about the timeline, how this fits in with the other Dragonlance lore?
Yeah, so this adventure is taking place in the spring of 351. So that is the heroes of the Lance in the first Dragonlance books. They show up in the fall of 351. Is when they regroup at the was it the end of the last tome? Is that it, John?
Yep.
Yeah, so that's where they start the adventure. And so the dragon armies have already progressed all the way to the Abyssinian subcontinent. And so this is a little bit before that. It's also located quite a ways away from it, so that you're getting all the Dragonlance feel and the war feel without like having the danger of interacting with the original campaign. So I think they did a really good job there. And we just got a new guest here, so let's bring in Philip here. Hi, Philip. Thanks for joining us.
Hello. Hi guys, thanks for having me.
Yeah, you bet. So we just got info that new Dragonlance book is dropping, and I saw your tweet there on that
Yeah,
cover image, and it is absolutely fantastic. So the next book is Dragons of Fate, and it comes out in, I think, August of 2023. And you did the
yes.
artwork. What can you tell us about the artwork?
So what do you mean?
Like,
What do you want to hear?
who talked to you first and, said, hey, I want you to do the work for this? And what kind of interaction did you have on the subject matter, that kind of stuff?
The background, yeah. So it was already last year when I did the first cover, also for the first book, Dragons of Deceit,
Mm-hmm.
and was the publisher, I think, Del Rey, for the books, who came to me asking me if I would like to do the cover for the new Dragonlance book. So it was them who contacted me, and I wasn't really into Dragonlance, but I was looking it up and was really excited to be able to have the honor to work on this.
Yeah, this is a beautiful, beautiful picture.
And this is for the site. Thank you very much. Appreciate. Yeah, so this is the second cover. Sorry, yeah.
I was going to say I'm impressed with how well your it fits with the other sorts of art that has gone with Dragonlance in the past. Just sort of thematically, the way you do characters and stuff like that. It really is a piece of that. I'm looking at a bunch of your landscapes and stuff like that come up, and yeah, those already fit very well. But what was doing? Sorry, I don't know your art better, but is
no problem.
It looks like you do a lot of these landscapes. Is character stuff relatively new for you?
Yeah, not new, but I mean, I did a lot of kind of portraits and figure drawings when I was a kid and younger, but yeah, I focus mostly on landscape environments, fantasy environments, or kind of old school, classic, romantic landscapes, which I like, and I'm inspired by old masters. So yeah, thank you very much. So the figures are kind of the whole style, and it's kind of a bit of my own, but also I try to kind of stay in that same flavors like Larry Elmore and others. So I pretty much looked them up and was inspired a bit by them, but I mean, it's a huge responsibility and a kind of a burden also to take over, of this big legacy from previous illustrators. So it's kind of tough, but I enjoyed working on it and kind of bringing my own vision. But it was also a bit directed, so a big shout out to Todd Lockwood, who did the dragon design for D&D, and it was Wizards of the Coast, which forced me to use his design. I even I have to admit, it's not an exact copy, but it's pretty much his work. And but I had previously, because Margaret Wise, her description was from the book, and I had my own design drawn in the sketch first phases, and was Wizards of the Coast, which sent me this sheet of all these D&D dragon designs.
Sure.
And they really insisted on making it like them, and I had two iterations on my own, and I guess they didn't like it, which is okay, I guess, but it's also hurt a bit. So, and now I kind of thought is hurt because it's his design. I don't know.
I
Just the
imagine
way
that's
it
one of the
goes.
challenges of working with somebody, like doing a cover for somebody else's intellectual property like this. You have to make
Yeah.
the concessions.
Yeah, of course. So it's more of a product. It's not an artwork or my art at all. Like,
Yeah.
it's more a product, and it has to serve some special need for like showing the characters, showing the landscape. It's like this high Clarice tower in construction, and has some kind of, yeah. It's
Yeah,
all
that's a
set and
really beautiful
given.
depiction. Is
But
the view here looking like north towards the High Claris Tower or south towards the Claris Tower? Do you know for sure?
to be honest, I don't know.
Okay.
It's like, it's also, I had the tower in a different position, like it was a bit cut on the right side, and Margaret Weiss insisted on like showing this kind of a house, a part on the right side of the tower.
Mm-hmm.
But this is all like, it's coming from a drawn illustration, a small illustration of the tower, which she wanted to have it like this, and pretty much, yeah, a rendition of this kind of similar features. And there was, yeah, a right side, a building, and she wanted to show this, so I had to move the tower. And yeah, you always have to kind of address and deal with a lot of stuff you maybe you don't want or don't like, or it's kind of suddenly you have to change some things you established in the sketching phase, and it's all working well. Yeah, that's kind of the tough things and problems you have to deal with as a illustrator.
Well, it turned out
But
really good in the end, so congratulations
yeah,
on getting the
I'm
cover.
also kind of happy how it turned out, and people love it, and it was a great honor to be able to work on this. Yeah.
So where else can we see your work? What else are you working on?
Yeah, pretty much on Twitter I post actively. I post my sketches and practice work and whatever comes up. So I'm not a full-time artist. So it's just in my spare time and kind of as a side job. Try to get more into art, having more time. And on ArtStation also is my whole portfolio. And from there comes also is my website, warlick.art. It's my private homepage but it's fed from ArtStation portfolio, and there's also prints to buy. And currently I'm working on concept designs for games, new games, and doing commission work when I can. I have a lot of requests for also other kind of custom D&D campaign, books, illustrations, covers. And I'm relatively new. I only started 3 years ago. So.
Oh wow!
But I have a background in art. I studied graphic design when I was young, and but I didn't really paint, especially in this sort of like fantasy environment stuff. So I really just started 3 years ago painting again digitally.
Mm-hmm.
And it's, yeah, so far it's going great, and it's a big opportunity, a great opportunity for me to work on this Dragonlance series. I think they will give me also the third cover to make next year.
Great.
Oh, really? You got the third cover. Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for joining us, and you can hang out here in the chat if you want to see what we're talking about. But
yeah, for sure.
Everyone check out.
I will just stay in the background, silent. But
okay.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Okay, so yeah, that's the new Dragonlance book, and it is Dragons of Fate. It'll be out next summer. It was out just in time. The first book, which was Dragons of Deceit, was out in time for the Gen Con road trip. So hopefully the next one will be out in time for the next Gen Con road trip. Speaking of road trips, Winter Fantasy, Dave, are you going?
My current plan is to go. It'll be my first public convention since March of 2020. So
I'm planning to go as well. And interestingly, I talked to Andy, who I played a round of the Dragonlance game with, DL11. He was maybe thinking of running DL11, the board game. We'll see. That don't hold him to that because he's just thinking about it. But that'd be an interesting thing. It'd be like about 4 slots to play that whole war game if you wanted to play it at Winter Fantasy. But the cool thing about that board game is you can kind of come and go. Like even the person playing the High Lord armies could swap out if DMs want to take breaks. So
because it's a cooperative game, right?
It's not. It's a war game, but there's a lot of different allies involved, so different players can play different allies.
Oh, okay.
Okay, let's talk about 1D&D real quick. So,
Cool.
John, you missed our 1D&D roundtable where we talked about the clerics and revised species. Anything specific that you want to drop in there? Any bits of wisdom you thought of?
Well, wisdom's a little generous. I'm excited about a lot of the design ideas that you see in there, which you probably talked about, like the what do they call it? The holy orders for clerics.
Yep.
Which are roughly equivalent to the fighting styles that fighters have. I think that's dynamite design space, and if they were to do that for a lot of different classes, I think that could really, with a very small amount of rules, add a lot of flavor to different classes and stuff like that. And these, I think, they're all really good. I mean, I really like what they're doing with them.
Someone brought up a good idea. I don't know if it was you, David, or your son, about how when you get to the next level up, where you get, let's see, 9th level, you could add another holy order. David or his son, I forget, you can let me know who suggested it, said, well, why don't we just take the existing orders and make them even better instead of adding a second order? Was that you, David?
That was me. I'd like to see those orders reinforced as they get at higher levels instead of sort of so it bolsters the feel of the holy order and the character rather than dilutes it by adding an additional one. And maybe that's something we'll see. But I think it would be a nice way to go about it.
Yeah. Sorry to sidetrack you, John. Keep going. Oh, you're muted, John.
Yeah, sorry, the dog was working for a minute. Did you guys make anything of the splitting out armor proficiency as armor training and making that different?
David explained that. Basically, it's because people were confusing it. They were confusing and thinking they'd get their proficiency bonus getting added to their armor somehow because they were proficient with their armor.
Okay.
So that was the reason given by Jeremy. And David's actually seen that happen in play. I've never seen anyone do that mistake, but Dave's seen it.
Yes, I've seen. But people show up with ridiculous armor classes at low levels, and then when we dug into it, we found out that they'd made the perfectly sensible move of adding their proficiency bonus to their armor proficiency.
Yeah, and that it actually makes a lot of sense because it does operate differently. So, I was interested in the prayer of healing changes.
Yeah, that was pretty big. All the spells changed, the ones that they changed at least. Here's prayer of healing. What do you think of that one, John?
I think it's good. I think, I mean, it's a spell because it takes 10 minutes to cast. It's always hard to use.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that it may improve it to a place where it'll be more useful.
It's an interesting thing that it gives you the effect of a short rest too.
Right.
But at the same time in the game, they seem to be removing a lot of short rest benefits. Like they're taking short rest away from most recharge things.
Although, for example, in this packet, that cleric, one of the thaumaturge gets back a channel divinity use, one channel divinity use after a short rest.
Right. Yeah.
So they are putting some stuff in there, but it's limited.
Right.
But another thing that they've done is they've made long rest something you have to wait 16 hours before you can do again.
Right.
So you're not going to be able to do, 2 hours of adventuring and then take another long rest.
Right.
So we may see smaller benefits from short rests because they're going to be taking them more often. I watch them as they make these tweaks, because of course each packet is learning from the previous one.
Yeah.
What did you guys think of the Ardlings?
Well, I mean, why do you think Ardlings are in the game? Why do you think they're bringing them in, John? I'd like to get your take on that.
I think there's a couple of things. First, we need to create the possibility for fantasy that isn't Tolkien-esque fantasy. So we want, and anthropomorphic animals is a way to give that a lot of space. This is a way to do a lot of different types of animals very quickly. It gives us access to some Egyptian sorts of storytelling. Maybe this is something that's going to feed sort of a Dark Sun type setting, but a new version of Dark Sun that does a little bit more with Egyptian stuff. I don't know. I think that it's interesting to see them break some of the molds with this. I thought, it says a lot about how they're thinking about things, that this version is so different from the previous version. There's still a little touch of the divine in it, but it's really a very heavy-duty rewrite.
Yeah, it is. I think you're right. I mean, I think they saw that the Tabaxi and the Harengon were really popular.
Yeah.
And this is a way to get them into the game from the core books. So right at the start. And not only get them, but get any version of an animal creature into the game, really.
Right. Yeah, it's going to make the people who make physical miniatures crazy, because they're going to have to develop a lot of different sprues. But
the frog head.
Yeah. That's going to make people crazy. But for those of us that just use our brains, it's good fun.
Yeah.
I mean, there's still a little bit of the divine magic to it, but overall, I like what they're doing.
Yeah. Circling back to cleric real quick. So, David, you've had a chance to play a cleric and a dwarf full on. Now, you suffered from the clerical curse of casting a 1d8 damage spell that someone else saves against every round.
Yes.
But other than that, how did you like playing the new cleric?
Well, it hasn't separated that much from what I'm used to in playing the 2014 editions of the cleric. But it definitely feels more versatile and less flavorful at these levels, partially because I've only just selected I'm going with the playtest, so I'm a life cleric, and I've only started to get those sort of powers come on. On the other hand, I've gotten some more generic cleric boosts with the channel divinity to get a little bit of damage, or channel divinity to get a little bit of healing, and that's been kind of nice. It does feel like you've got some versatile features that are always available and that are simple and fit the traditional flavor of the cleric. So I'm looking forward to seeing more of the subclass flavor start to come on.
Yeah. Good morning, Dragonlance Saga. Thanks for joining us. Liked your videos. Dragonlance Saga just did a great video on a book that you did an article back, David. It was Slaying the Dragon. The story of TSR. Do you remember that one? I think you did a book about it.
Oh, yes. That was the story mainly focusing on the period of TSR from the 1985 takeover, where Gary Gygax lost his role at the head of the company, through the years of Lorraine Williams being in charge of the company, and sort of the business trials that came between there and the company being taken over in 1997 by Wizards of the Coast. So it's always interesting. In a way, it's very dramatic, and it's always interesting seeing sort of missteps and problems that led the company to go to the verge of bankruptcy, and to the point where they weren't publishing anything for a summer, and eventually getting bought out by Wizards of the Coast, a move that may have saved D&D from a fate as sort of a brand that somebody might pick up and just license products and t-shirts and television shows with the game being an afterthought. And certainly Wizards of the Coast being run by people who love D&D, taking over the game, that was that really saved a big part of the hobby.
Yeah, that's a great video by Dragonlance Saga. I suggest you check it out if you can. I was in a bookstore in Seattle in 1992, and I found, see if this works. I found this book here, The Primal Order.
Oh, yes.
And if you look in the back here, Wizards of the Coast. This was before they had even done Magic the Gathering. So they did this book as like a generic book about the gods that you could use in any campaign. And then 8 years later, they had D&D. So big turn of events for them. And now this ties in a little bit with the Dragonlance campaign. Some of the subject matter of the book was, one of the big mistakes TSR did was they really focused into all these campaigns, and the campaigns became what the fans were fans of the campaign, not fans of D&D. And so it really splintered the fan base. So people who were playing Dragonlance didn't want to play Ravenloft, and people playing Ravenloft didn't want to play Planescape, etc. And so they're being very careful about not doing that in this edition. So every book they do is just kind of a toe dip into a different world, right? Like we have this one just dipping their toes into Dragonlance. They've just done the same thing in various other campaign worlds. So I don't expect that'll change. What do you think of that, David?
Well, that's spot on. That one of the problems that led to TSR's downfall in the 80s and into the 90s was that they were splintering the audience as these products, like say fans of Dark Sun just got products aimed at them and were buying their own. We're just focusing on buying Dark Sun products. All that development cost, all that publishing cost, all that startup cost for that particular book started to exceed the expense that they could actually get in profit from the books. So in a way, they were publishing more and more and more, but they were tanking their ability to make money from these products. And even, funnily enough, there were some products that were costing more to print than they actually made when they sold them. So they were losing money on each of these beautifully boxed books or boxed game sets, and apparently trying to make it up in volume, but that never seemed to work.
Speaking of boxed game sets, over your shoulder there, you have that Dungeons and Dragons. Is that the Holmes edition? Is that what that is?
Yeah, this would be I will never get the finger right. But that's the Holmes edition that first came out in 1977. I think that is
the D&D version I learned on.
Yep, same here.
Found that in a White Elephant store in Spokane, Washington, next to all the war games I like to play, like Panzer Blitz and Panzer Leader, etc. And took that home, started reading through the book, and was very unhappy. I was 9 years old. Very unhappy not to find Dracula. He wasn't in there. And neither was Frankenstein. So I thought, well, this isn't any good. And it wasn't until a little later I found vampires and flesh golems.
Now, here's a deep cut question. Did you have the version of it that had the dice or the chits?
I did not have chits. Did you? Did you have chits?
I had a version with chits. I think I had both versions at one point or another. Or maybe I had the dice and the kid across the street who taught me to play had chits or something like that. But, I bought on eBay a version of it because I wanted the cover, and it has chits in it. I had like big flash memory.
Yeah, this would be the dice that came with my 1977 box.
Really just worn down to a marble now.
Worn down to a marble. You know, here's the old man moment here. You know, we had to mark in all the numbers so the colors came through, and I think they included crayons with some of the sets, so that you could manage to do that. And the numbers are only numbered 0 through 9, so you'd have to color one side or another so that you knew.
We always just rolled a d6 with it, and on a 4, 5, or a 6, it was 11 or up. 11 up.
Yeah, you don't tell the DM what the high number color is. It just changes as needed.
Yes.
Right.
All right. Okay, back to the playtest. Any other thoughts on the species? So we were doing Ardling. We were looking at the Ardling.
I thought there were things I really liked about the Dragonborn and the Goliath too. The breath weapon stuff is much improved. I love the idea of being able to choose between line or cone.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting to see if actual dragons get to make that choice.
Right. Yeah. If you're going to make that choice here, why can't dragons do the same?
That will be huge for dragons.
Yeah, because blue dragons and black dragons really kind of suffered.
Yeah.
Being only able to do lines.
But yeah, so I like that. I like what they're doing with flight. The different versions of Goliath. I'm trying to go fast because I know you guys covered this once.
Right.
The different versions of Goliaths, all the different giant types and the heritage gifts there. I thought those were cool. Cloud Giant seemed especially nice. The teleport, and I like the way those are, again, using that a number of times a day equal to your proficiency bonus.
Yeah.
I think that's going to be really useful. But no, I think where I got much more interested was in just a lot of the little rules changes that you see in the back matter of the
glossary.
Yeah.
Right.
So like equipping weapons, I love the way they changed that. I mean, it's much more forgiving. You can draw or put away a weapon on every attack action. Even if you make
it under attack, right?
It's equipping
under the attack action.
Right, attack. Yeah.
Banishment spell is a big change.
Yeah, that's
long needed. I don't know why they were so reluctant to make changes all through the years. Like every other edition, they weren't too reluctant to make changes, but like they knew banishment was a problem for 10 years and they never did a thing about it. Any idea why that might be?
Well, clearly it was a strategy. They really, really wanted to avoid any changes that prevented folks from that invalidated things that were in print in the books, unless they were just out and out mistakes. And the only time that I can think of that they broke that rule was for, what was it, Healing Spirit, when they actually did a new printing of the book and changed the way the spell worked. But generally, they were absolutely determined not to make anything in print different.
I think that it has become such a core element in every party's strategy, is figuring out who to banish so you can fight just half the fight each time.
Yeah.
And so DMs have had to build encounters bigger so that there's stuff for them to banish and stuff for them to fight.
Right.
And so it's going to change everything when you do this. And I think that they're reluctant to make those kinds of changes at small moments because it doesn't signal the kind of watershed change that we're going to have to make as DMs as we think about what we prepare.
The thing is, yeah, that's true. But there's going to be mistakes like that come in this edition. There's going to be something they miss. And I really hope they fix it and don't make us wait 10 years. Now, that only really matters when you're playing like an organized play where you have set rules that you have to follow, right? When you're playing a home game, you just change it.
Right.
No big deal. And so, speaking of, well, we'll get back to organized play in a second. Let's look at the rest of the stuff in the glossary here.
Tiny grapplers.
Uh-oh.
I'm amused by the idea of tiny grapplers. So if you look at the movable under grappled, it says the grappler can drag or carry you when it moves, but the grappler suffers the slowed condition while moving unless you are tiny or 2 or more sizes smaller than the grappler. So if we have 2 opposing tiny grapplers, they are not slowed when they're grappling each other. So we can have these really wild and woolly brownie grappling matches. And I think that would be hilarious. I think it's just a wording problem, really, but I thought it was hilarious.
Yeah. They could have just left off the tiny and stayed with the 2 or more sizes smaller.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
They didn't need the tiny word.
It's a feature, John. It's a feature.
I dig the guidance change. I think that and spells like it becoming reactions is perfect.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't. I'm looking for where I made notes.
Let's see if I have another one here. So
the light weapon property.
Oh yeah.
I really like the way they're handling that because it's giving you the free offhand attack without having to spend your bonus weapon or bonus action on it.
Yeah.
So
I mean, that 2-weapon fighting has always been way underpowered, so no one really ever did it much. Rogues would do it just so that they could guarantee the sneak attack.
Right.
But not many others would.
Yeah, playing Maynard, my my rogue a couple of months ago.
You may have heard of Maynard.
To 20th level. You may have heard of him. He was the star in the Duet, the Demogorgon musical. Anyway, he was a 2-weapon swashbuckler, and man, having to choose between that offhand weapon attack and using the cunning action was punishing. That definitely highlighted the need for that change.
Yeah.
Okay. Next subject. So the December virtual D&D weekend's going on right now, and I just ran the new adventure for the new campaign. So Baldman Games has a new campaign where they're doing a Dragonlance campaign. Dragons of Divinity is the first adventure. It's a really cool intro adventure for players new to the world of Ansalon. They did a really good job on that. So I'm excited to continue on with this campaign. I think it's going to be available to everyone in a couple months. But if you want to play it, you can play it at the virtual weekends. What else have I got? So that campaign is Vault of the Undying. I don't know, the scope of it or where it starts or stops, but it's supposed to be, in theory, in parallel with the hardcover, such that you could. Go ahead, David.
Does it credit an author for that adventure?
I think this one was Dwarven DM. I don't know what his name is, but he's Dwarven DM on Twitter. Yeah, I'll dig into the thing when someone else is talking and see if I can find the name for it. So we got Keys from the Golden Vault coming up in this winter, coming up, I think it's in February. I think it's the February release. And that's going to be released at the same time as the movie, or right before the movie. So I bet it'll try to tie in with the movie. And then we got Big B's Glory of the Giants, the Book of Many Things, the Vandelver campaign. That's interesting. And then Planescape. And Teos made a good article about how this playtest is much different than the playtest for 5 or for 5e, in that it doesn't come complete and with an adventure to play. And it'd be nice if they had these things have an appendix that was the playtest 1D&D stats to play these campaigns. Because when I got to thinking about it, he's right. Not having a full set of rules and a campaign to play, you kind of really are lacking in the playtest. What do you guys think of that?
I think it's awfully hard right now to access and use the playtest stuff. And a lot of that is because, and I understand why, but with so many of us, especially me and my players, are dependent on D&D Beyond. And the playtest stuff used to be available in D&D Beyond, and you could build characters with it. But the dev time was way too expensive for them to do stuff and then scrap it. So they stopped doing that. But that means that it has to be very old school pen and paper sorts of character building, or, you know, the digital version. You can do it in an Excel spreadsheet, I suppose, but that's like work. So I think that makes it as hard to try this stuff out as not having an adventure to play does. But we're also not seeing the way a lot of the changes they're making changes adventure design. You know, we talked about banishment. That's one example of things that are going to really significantly impact the way we build encounters. But that's not something that we're seeing in this playtest.
Right. Yeah, it's not complete, right?
Right.
You can take this playtest cleric and play him where? With 5e characters. So
Right.
how do you know he's balanced, right? How do you know he balances with the whole of the new edition? That's a good point. And it's a good point about D&D Beyond being such a crutch for us. It's so good at what it does.
Not a crutch, it's a tool.
It's so good at what it does that we all rely on it now. That's that kind of gets into something that's just started up. It's like hashtag OpenDND. I don't know if you guys have seen it or not, but I guess a lot of independent creators are starting to get contacted by Wizards with NDAs and such to get kind of on board with the new edition. And so there's a lot of worry and a lot of concern that the OGL will they'll try to do something like the GSL, like they did with 4th edition, which split up the base, and Pathfinder went its own way when that happened. And so have you guys seen anything in that regard, or any concerns in that regard for the OGL going away?
I haven't seen anything. I haven't paid that much attention.
Yeah, I wonder how much they would actually have the power to block folks using the existing 5e OGL to publish things for 1D&D.
So
obviously,
I mean, that's exactly the point. They wouldn't, right?
right.
And that's what happened with 4th edition. So 4th edition came out, and they went to a GSL for 4th edition, a game something license, and Paizo said, well, we can't use that. That's not acceptable. We're going to have to stay with 3rd edition and use the OGL in 3rd edition and make our own game. And so if the same thing happens again with 6th edition, and people say, we can't take that new rules you're going to put out, we're going to stay with 5th edition and make our own system. So that's the concern, just like what happened when 4th edition came out. They can't stop us from using 5e OGL or 3e OGL.
Yeah, but would you even be unable to publish things for 1D&D using the 5e OGL? It seems like most of the pieces you would need are already there. So unless maybe for new character subclasses, maybe if you wanted to do new classes, you would be blocked, but certainly not if you were doing adventures. I can't imagine that would be an issue. So, and to some extent, it's out of their hands.
Mm-hmm.
But again, it's been so generous now that I'd hate to see them clamp down and try and put everything in their walled garden again.
Yeah,
I think it's a huge mistake to for Wizards to get too I'll use the word draconian on that license, just because it's such a small piece compared to the general D&D market. D&D is still the gateway drug for this type of entertainment, for all the different games and all the different things. And if small publishers are producing games or adventures or settings or classes and stuff like that to go with it, they're not chipping away very much at the Wizards base, but any antipathy in the marketplace the way they got a lot of it from the split with Pathfinder and Paizo and all that, that does way more damage than a little bit of, minnows nibbling at their feet.
Yeah, right on. The fear is they don't see that. The fear is the CEO is from Microsoft. The president is from Microsoft. The new creative director is from Microsoft. And they have a different way of doing things. And it's business, 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 and control, control, control. And they won't be as open.
Well put.
You're right on. It's not good for them. And the question is, will they see it? So how do we fight back? It's like, how do we educate them, the people that make the decisions, that it's best for them? I think that's the route to take as much as we can. Is we can't just whine against the, yell at the wind. We got to somehow educate them or get through to them what's the best thing for them. And that might be our only chance if that's the direction they're going. Okay, well, I'm about to wrap it up with the subjects. Do you guys have anything you want to talk about specifically, John?
Not really, no.
Okay, David?
Well, we were talking about some new books, and let me pull a couple of things off my shelf here. This is How to Defend Your Lair by Keith Auman, which I got recently, and that is he's the author of those The Monsters Know What They're Doing books that kind of bring monster strategy to DMs. And I like the idea of those sorts of monster strategy books for two reasons. First of all, I think they lead perhaps especially non-tactically minded DMs to create more interesting encounters than, you're both at one end, either end of the room, you and the monsters, and you face off. You kind of learn ways to create situations where the battlefield that the monsters have chosen benefits the monsters in ways that highlight what makes them special. And I think that leads to more interesting conflicts. And this book in particular leans into that direction by, presenting itself as advice for monsters on how to defend themselves. And the hope is that by creating situations where the monsters, try and get a home field advantage, they show off what makes them unique and interesting. So that potentially makes things more fun. The one thing to be careful about with a book like this is to make sure that you're not, as a DM, getting enticed into playing to win. Yeah. You've got unlimited monsters. Your objective is to make fun situations that show off, let the players, make interesting choices and use interesting tactics and show off their abilities to the best, not to win the encounter. And try and avoid sort of a Tucker's Kobold situation. That Tucker's Kobold is sort of a legendary adventure from the early days of the hobby, where kobolds used every ability and every trick and every scheme that you can imagine to defend their lair and posed a deadly threat to high-level characters. That could be fun for really tactically minded players, but I think most people would find that sort of thing a slog, and you don't want to go too far in that direction. But anyway, it's got a lot of cool advice for that kind of making the most of your monsters and creating interesting situations to play through.
He's got a book for players too. So if you're players, the sort of mutually assured destruction thing, there's a player strategy book too.
I saw he was at GameholeCon. Did you go to GameholeCon, David?
No.
So he was there, and he was running almost like little mini tournaments where he had different layers set up with monsters in them and the party going up against the monsters. It looked like a lot of fun. It's like, old school tournament type stuff. So yeah, you wouldn't want to do that in a regular campaign, but sometimes that kind of stuff can be pretty fun when it's like a tournament type setting. And so look for him maybe at future campaigns or conventions like that. If I see him, I'll definitely see if I can sign up for a game like that.
Yeah, that sounds like a lot of fun, and
Yeah.
and you can create situations like that in your home game that are a lot of fun. Just be wary of not making it too overly lethal on
Right.
account of using the best tactics and your fiat as a DM to overwhelm the players. And then
you had an article too, David, about skills and the D20 and how the D20 is too variable or it's not too variable, and you should lean into the variability that it has.
Right. One of the big decision making at the bottom level of crunch in role-playing games is the dice and the core mechanic, and the big separation, setting aside dice pool games and some of the other more quirky ones, is whether to have something like a D20, which is a linear progression with each number being 5% likely to hit on a D20 roll, or to use some sort of curve, like we've seen systems that are similar to D20 in GURPS, for example, where you roll 3d6 and there's a curve, so results like 10, 11, 12 are much more likely to hit than ones at the bottom and top end of the scale, like 3 and 18. Now, the cool thing about D20, as we all know, is D20s roll beautifully. The odds of any particular number are very predictable. It's kind of cool to have all the exotic dice and the die rolls. I've got T-shirts with D20s on them, and that's fun. There's a lot of different virtues of it, but on the other hand, it's kind of a penalty on expert players, because if I run through a bunch of numbers in my post, but if you're, say, got a +8 to your die versus somebody with a +1, that +8 is potentially a 12th level character with an 18 stat, and they've only got a 40 percentage point higher chance of success, or in the example that I cited, to get a 20 than somebody with just a +1 who's a new character. So that expert doesn't seem that much more expert at the table, and we see that all the time when DMs ask for somebody to make, say, an Arcana check, and then the barbarian lucks into a 16, 17, 18 and makes the check. Well, the wizard with a high bonus flubs it, and once that seems pretty amusing. Hey, the barbarian somehow knew those ancient runes, but it does make the person who's playing the wizard feel like, what am I here for? I put all these choices, I made all these choices to make this character good at Arcana, and I'm still getting upstaged by the barbarian or whoever happened to roll well. That's kind of the disadvantage of the linear D20 with its big swings. What I recommend, and what Jeremy Crawford recommends, is to kind of lean into or steer into the D20 as a storytelling device, and look for those wild swings as excuses to explain why these strange things are happening in the game world, and welcome them as ways to send the table in unpredictable directions.
That's a good point. I mean, if you knew the outcome of every roll, you wouldn't be playing the game, right?
Right.
If you knew the wizard always makes their Arcana check and the fighter never does.
Yep.
But I do often, and I'd like to get your take on this as a player, I do often, when I'm parsing out knowledge, give it to the people that are trained without even making rolls.
So that's a gumshoe mechanic. That's
Yeah.
like the core idea in the gumshoe game. And we've got the pieces in D&D 1 and 5th edition to do something like that. You could allow players to auto succeed on checks a number of times per day equal to their proficiency bonus in any skills they're proficient in.
Oh, that's an interesting idea.
So, and so then, yeah, once every long or however many, so if you're first level, 2 times per long rest, you get to succeed on an Arcana check if you're trained in Arcana. And you just say, no, I'm going to auto succeed on this.
That's interesting. I mean, you could set it with a caveat that it can't be, it's got to be DC 15 or lower or something like that, right?
Well, and the gumshoe system has like basic knowledge or basic things that you would learn, and then there's stuff that you'd only get with like an exceptional roll. So you don't. Then you'd have to put in a system, which we've seen in some of the one packets and some of the others, and not in some of the others. The idea of a critical success on a skill check. So, but if you can critically succeed on a skill check, then auto succeeding doesn't give you that 1 in 20 opportunity to critically succeed.
Right.
But anyway, there's ways to muck around with that, and even allow them to do it after they fail. So if you fail a check a number of times a day, you can turn it into a success equal to your proficiency bonus, and then that makes those trained choices really important.
Yeah. So I think the 2 keys to making the most of the swingy die in D20 is, one, as a DM, either reward people who are trained by just giving them automatic success, or reward people who are good at, sort of those middle of the road tasks by just saying, you as the wizard can read these runes and not even opt for a roll with the chance of failure. So they feel like they're rewarded, and the game outcome makes sense to everyone by this is something you do a lot, Tom, by rewarding success automatically for the people who are most skilled or trained in particular skills. And on the other side is just sort of welcome these surprises as a feature, not a bug of the game, because as DMs and as players of D&D, the reason why we're not writing novels is that so the twists and turns of the game can surprise us at the table and take everything in unexpected directions. And if we welcome that as a feature of the D20 and not a bug, that's the way to embrace it.
Well said, David. I think on that note, we'll close it up. So thanks, David. Thanks, John. Thanks, Philip, for joining us for the conversation. And great picture again, Philip. I look forward to seeing your next one for sure.
Thank you very much for having me. It's nice to listen.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye, folks.